Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Last spring, my buddy Jake and I had this tradition of helping each other with our annual property cleanups. We'd tackle everything from cutting down damaged trees to getting our gardens ready and dealing with those persistent weeds that seem to take over our yards every winter. It was my turn to host the cleanup first, so that Friday night in March 2023, I got everything prepared. I was sharpening all the tools, getting the chainsaw chains ready, and prepping the lawnmower blade. You know, the usual stuff. One of the important tasks was mixing gas with 2-cycle oil for the equipment. I finished pretty late and put everything away for the next day. Saturday morning, Jake pulls up in his pickup around 8 a.m., bringing coffee and these amazing breakfast sandwiches from the local deli. "Thought we might need the extra fuel today," he said with a grin. While we're sitting on his tailgate enjoying breakfast, my neighbors Tom and Jerry cruise by in their beat-up Honda Civic, trailing smoke like a locomotive. "Man, look at that smoke show," Jake laughed, taking a sip of his coffee. "Yeah," I replied. "I bet when they go to the gas station, they fill up with oil and check the gas instead of the other way around." We had a good laugh about it and finished our breakfast, not thinking much more about it at the time. When we started gathering the tools and planning our attack for the day, I couldn't find my gas cans anywhere. Not the mixed gas, regular gas, or any gas can at all. That's when it hit us why Tom and Jerry's car was smoking so badly. "Those jerks stole our gas," I said to Jake, fuming. "Man, that's low." Jake shook his head. "Real low." We had no choice but to make a supply run for new gas cans, gas, and more 2-cycle oil. After we got back, we noticed Tom and Jerry's car passing by several times, but we managed to get a lot done despite the setback. The following weekend was dedicated to Jake's cleanup. A couple of weeks later, we had this family dinner at my wife's grandparents' house, who happened to be Tom and Jerry's grandparents too. Toward the end of the evening, after most people had left, I was chatting with my wife's grandfather, Phil, when I needed to use the bathroom. On my way there, I spotted a gas can with very distinct paint marks that I recognized immediately. "Hey, Phil," I called out, "where'd this gas can come from?" "Oh, Tom and Jerry left it here," he replied casually. "Actually, that's mine," I explained, and grabbed it along with another one I found nearby, loading them both in my truck. Every time their smoking Honda passed by, it just ate at me. So I came up with what I like to call my special blend plan. I bought some gas, diesel fuel, and various oils, mixing them into a cocktail that I knew wouldn't do any engine any favors. I filled my new 6-gallon gas can with this mixture. That evening, I made sure to mow my lawn when I knew they'd be around, using clean gas for my mower, of course. Then I accidentally left that special blend can out. The next morning, I went to work without checking the can. When I got home, my wife met me at the door with a smirk. "Your plan worked like a charm," she said. "You should have seen them going back and forth. Their car sputtering and smoking worse than ever. Last time they drove out, they didn't make it back." Sure enough, about an hour later, Tom shows up at my door. "Hey man, our car broke down on Marshall Road," he said nervously. "Think you could take a look?" "Sorry," I replied, rubbing my temple. "Got a killer migraine. Maybe tomorrow?" "But we don't have insurance," Jerry chimed in, panic clear in his voice. "It's on the main road." "That's rough," I said, closing the door. The highway patrol found their car and had it towed. Would have cost them around $500 to get it out of impound, plus they needed current registration and insurance. The car wasn't worth that much anyway. Being the type who always seemed to land on their feet, they got lucky when Pastor Mike from the local church gave them an old Ford Taurus. Took a few more cans of my special blend, but within a month, that engine locked up too, right in their grandparents' yard. They scrapped it and, thanks to their tax returns, bought themselves a nice Ford F-150. But wouldn't you know it, that truck started having problems too. Smoked like crazy until they finally took it to a mechanic who found the real issue. Cost them $1,500 to get it running right again, but I haven't had any gas come up missing since then. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be writing about something like this, but here we are. This happened last summer, and it still makes my blood boil when I think about it. I've lived in my house for over 15 years, and until recently, I never had any major issues with my neighbors. That all changed when Bob Miller moved in next door about 8 months ago. The source of all this drama was a beautiful 100-year-old oak tree in my backyard. This tree was here long before any of our houses were built, and it's always been one of my favorite features of the property. My kids grew up climbing it, we built a treehouse in it when they were younger, and it provides amazing shade during our scorching summers. Bob, however, took issue with my tree from day one. He moved in during winter when the tree was bare, and as soon as spring came around and the leaves started growing back, he began complaining. At first, it was just annoying comments over the fence about leaves falling in his yard. "Hey, your tree's dropping leaves on my property again," he'd say. As if trees don't naturally shed leaves. I always responded politely, "That's what trees do, Bob. I'm happy to help rake them up if it's really bothering you." He'd just grunt and walk away. I tried to be a good neighbor, even offering to help him clean his gutters when they got clogged with leaves. But nothing seemed to satisfy him. The situation escalated in June when we had a pretty strong thunderstorm. A small dead branch, no bigger than my arm, fell from the tree and landed on his side of the fence. It didn't cause any damage, but Bob showed up at my door the next morning, red-faced and agitated. "That tree of yours is a hazard," he shouted, pointing accusingly at my oak. "It could have killed someone. You need to cut it down before it does." I remained calm, explaining, "Bob, I have an arborist check the tree every year. It's completely healthy. That was just a small dead branch, which is normal for any tree." "I don't care what your tree hugger says. That thing needs to go." I firmly stood my ground. "The tree stays, Bob. It's on my property, it's healthy, and it's not going anywhere." He stormed off, muttering under his breath. I thought that would be the end of it, but boy was I wrong. A week later, I was doing some gardening in my backyard when I heard Bob's back door slam. I looked up to see him marching toward the fence, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw what he was carrying, a hunting rifle. He raised the rifle and pointed it in my general direction, though not directly at me. "I've had enough of this. Either that tree goes or there's gonna be trouble." My hands started shaking, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Bob, put the gun down. You're committing a serious crime right now." "The only crime here is you endangering my property with this monster of a tree," he shouted, waving the rifle around. "I'm giving you 3 days to get it cut down or I'll take care of it myself." I slowly reached for my phone in my pocket, keeping my eyes on Bob and the rifle. "I'm calling the police, Bob. This is absolutely unacceptable." "Go ahead. Call them. They'll agree with me that this tree is a hazard." With trembling fingers, I dialed cops. "Yes, hello? I need police at my address immediately. My neighbor is threatening me with a firearm over a tree in my yard." Bob's face paled slightly when he heard me actually making the call, but he kept the rifle raised. "You're making a big mistake," he yelled, but I could hear a slight tremor in his voice. The dispatcher assured me officers were on their way and told me to stay on the line. Those next few minutes were the longest of my life, standing there with my neighbor pointing a gun in my direction while we waited for the police. Finally, I heard sirens in the distance. Bob must have heard them too because he lowered the rifle and started backing away toward his house. But it was too late for him to hide the evidence. 3 police cars came screeching to a halt in front of our houses, and officers quickly surrounded both properties. "Drop the weapon," came the commanding voice over a loudspeaker. "Put your hands where we can see them." Bob, finally seeming to realize the gravity of his actions, placed the rifle on the ground and raised his hands. The officers moved in quickly, cuffing him and securing the weapon. I gave my statement to the police, still shaking from the encounter. They took multiple photos of the tree, the property line, and where Bob had been standing. They also interviewed other neighbors who had witnessed the incident from their windows. Bob was arrested and taken away in one of the police cars. An officer stayed behind to take my detailed statement and advised me to file for a restraining order as soon as possible. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Bob was charged with criminal threatening, a felony in our state, and aggravated menacing. I hired a lawyer and filed for a restraining order, which was granted almost immediately given the circumstances. During the criminal proceedings, it came out that Bob had a history of similar confrontational behavior in his previous neighborhood, though he'd never escalated to using a weapon before. He'd been forced to move after multiple complaints from neighbors about his aggressive behavior. The district attorney took the case very seriously, especially given Bob's history and the use of a firearm. They offered him a plea deal. He could plead guilty to criminal threatening and receive a lesser sentence, or face trial for multiple felony charges. Bob initially tried to fight the charges, claiming he felt threatened by my tree and was acting in defense of his property. His lawyer must have talked some sense into him because he eventually accepted the plea deal. The final outcome was better than I could have hoped for. Bob was sentenced to 2 years probation, mandatory anger management classes, and most importantly, he was prohibited from possessing firearms. The judge also made it very clear that he was not to have any contact with me or my family, and the restraining order would remain in place indefinitely. As for Bob's house, his wife, who had been away visiting family during the incident, filed for divorce shortly after his arrest. She sold the house and moved away, and we now have lovely new neighbors who actually appreciate the shade from my oak tree. I also took some additional precautions after the incident. I installed security cameras around my property, had another arborist inspect the tree, who once again confirmed its excellent health, and joined our neighborhood watch program. I even started a community group focused on local tree preservation, which has gained quite a following. The whole experience was terrifying, but it taught me some valuable lessons. First, stand your ground when you know you're in the right, but always do so safely and legally. Second, document everything. Those security camera recordings and witness statements were crucial in the legal proceedings. And third, never underestimate the importance of knowing your rights as a property owner. Looking back, I'm grateful for how the justice system handled the situation. Bob's actions could have ended tragically, but instead they led to him getting the help he clearly needed through mandatory anger management, while also ensuring he couldn't possess weapons to threaten anyone else. The oak tree still stands proud in my backyard, perhaps even more majestic now that it represents not just natural beauty, but also standing up to bullies and the triumph of justice. My kids, who are now in college, love hearing the story when they come home to visit, though they can hardly believe it happened in our peaceful neighborhood. I've since learned that trees, especially ancient ones like my oak, often become focal points of neighbor disputes. But usually, these disputes are handled through proper legal channels, property surveys, arborist reports, and if necessary, civil court proceedings. Threatening someone with a firearm is never the answer and will only land you in serious legal trouble. The incident has actually brought our neighborhood closer together. Many neighbors I barely knew before came forward to offer support during the legal proceedings, and now we have regular block parties under the shade of my oak tree. Some have even started planting their own trees, turning our street into a green canopy that everyone, except Bob, wherever he is now, can enjoy. I've also become something of a local resource for neighbors dealing with tree-related disputes. I always advise them to know their rights, document everything, and most importantly, handle disagreements through proper legal channels. It's amazing how many conflicts can be resolved through calm discussion and professional consultation rather than threats and intimidation. As for Bob, I heard through the grapevine that he moved to another state after completing his probation. I hope he learned from this experience and is getting the help he needs to manage his anger. Sometimes I wonder what made him so angry about trees in the first place, but I suppose some people just can't appreciate the beauty and value of nature. The incident has even had some positive influences on local policy. Our city council used my case as an example when they were updating ordinances about tree preservation and neighbor disputes. They implemented clearer guidelines for resolving tree-related conflicts and increased penalties for those who take matters into their own hands illegally. My oak tree continues to thrive, dropping its leaves every fall and providing shade every summer, just as it has for the past 100 years. Now it's not just a tree, it's a symbol of standing up for what's right and letting the law, not intimidation, resolve disputes. I still do my regular maintenance on the tree, perhaps even more diligently now. Every spring I have it professionally inspected and trimmed if necessary. I keep detailed records of all maintenance and inspections just in case anyone ever questions its health or safety again. But these days, the only comments I get about the tree are compliments on its beauty and questions about its history. The experience has given me a deeper appreciation for our legal system and the importance of community support. What could have been a tragic confrontation instead became a testament to the power of standing up for your rights while letting justice take its proper course. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in my backyard enjoying the dappled sunshine through the oak's leaves, I think about how differently things could have turned out if I had given in to Bob's threats. Not only would we have lost a beautiful, healthy tree, but we would have let bullying and intimidation win over reason and law. Instead, my oak tree stands as a living reminder that you should never let someone else's irrational fears or anger force you into doing something you know isn't right. The law exists to protect our rights and resolve disputes peacefully, and while the legal process can sometimes be slow and stressful, it's far better than allowing threats and intimidation to rule the day. My story has become something of a local legend, shared at neighborhood gatherings and community meetings as an example of how not to handle disputes with neighbors. It's also served as a warning about the serious consequences of using firearms to threaten others. Bob lost his right to own guns, faced criminal charges, and ultimately had his life completely upended, all because he couldn't handle some falling leaves in his yard. The oak tree that caused all this drama continues to grow and thrive, its branches reaching ever higher into the sky. Every ring in its trunk tells a story, and now it has one more tale to add to its century-long history. The time it became the center of a neighborhood drama and emerged victorious, just like the justice system that protected it. Update. It's been 2 years since the incident with Bob and his gun threat over my oak tree. I thought I'd share what's happened since then, as there have been some interesting developments. First off, the tree is still standing proud and healthy as ever. I just had my annual arborist inspection last month, and they confirmed it's in excellent condition. I've actually learned so much about tree care since the incident that I've become something of a local tree expert myself. About 6 months ago, I received an unexpected letter from Bob's ex-wife, Sarah. She wanted to apologize for her ex-husband's behavior and share some information she thought I should know. We met for coffee, and what she told me was eye-opening. Bob had been struggling with untreated mental health issues for years, she explained. The incident with your tree was just the final straw that made me realize he needed help, whether he wanted it or not. She went on to tell me that after their divorce and Bob's probation, he finally agreed to seek professional help. He was diagnosed with severe anxiety and paranoid tendencies, which explained but didn't excuse his extreme reaction to the tree. The legal aftermath of the incident continued to unfold in interesting ways. Remember those security cameras I installed after everything happened? Well, they came in handy when Bob's insurance company tried to deny coverage for his legal fees, claiming his actions were premeditated and therefore not covered under his homeowner's policy. My lawyer provided the footage to Bob's attorney, which showed the confrontation was clearly a heat-of-the-moment incident rather than planned. This helped Bob get his legal coverage, and while I didn't particularly care about helping him, his ex-wife Sarah was grateful as it meant their shared assets wouldn't be completely drained by legal fees. The restraining order is still in place, and I've had no contact with Bob. Sarah mentioned he moved to Arizona and is doing better with medication and therapy. She even shared that he sent her an email expressing remorse about the whole tree incident, though he hasn't attempted to contact me directly. Which is good, as it would violate the restraining order. My story has had some positive ripple effects in our community. The local police department now uses it as a case study in their community outreach programs about dispute resolution and firearm safety. They've even asked me to speak at a few neighborhood watch meetings about the importance of proper documentation and security measures. The city council also finally passed that tree protection ordinance I mentioned before. Under the new rules, healthy trees over 75 years old are considered heritage trees and can't be removed without extensive documentation proving they're a genuine hazard. They actually used my arborist's reports as examples of proper tree health documentation. My security camera system has expanded into a neighborhood-wide network. After seeing how useful mine were, several neighbors installed their own systems, and we've created a voluntary sharing program with local law enforcement. It's already helped solve a few package thefts and vandalism cases. The new neighbors who bought Bob's house, Tom and Linda, have become good friends. They've got 2 young kids who love climbing the oak tree. With proper safety gear and supervision, of course. Last summer, we built a new treehouse together using sustainable materials and making sure not to harm any major branches. You know, Tom told me while we were working on the treehouse, when we were house hunting, we specifically chose this property because of your oak tree. The shade it provides cuts our cooling bills significantly in the summer. The community tree preservation group I started has grown to over 200 members. We've successfully protected several other historic trees in the neighborhood from development projects, and we've started a program to plant new trees in public spaces. Last month we had our annual block party under the oak tree, and someone brought up Bob's infamous meltdown. Instead of feeling anxious about it, I found myself laughing along with everyone else at the absurdity of threatening someone with a gun over tree leaves. You know what's funny? I told the group. If Bob had just talked to me reasonably about his concerns, I would have been happy to work something out. Maybe set up a better leaf collection system or split the cost of gutter guards. Instead, he chose the one response guaranteed to get him in serious trouble. The incident has also inspired me to get more involved in local government. I now serve on the city's Environmental Advisory Board, where I help review development proposals and make recommendations about preserving natural features in our community. My kids, who were away at college when this all happened, have graduated now. My daughter even chose to do her senior thesis in environmental law, partly inspired by our oak tree drama. She jokes that the tree helped her choose her career path. Looking back, what started as a frightening confrontation with an unstable neighbor has transformed into a catalyst for positive change in our community. The oak tree that Bob was so determined to destroy has become a symbol of community resilience and the importance of standing up for what's right. I still keep all my documentation organized, arborist reports, maintenance records, security footage backups, but these days it's more out of habit than fear. The incident with Bob taught me the value of being prepared and documenting everything, a lesson that served me well in other aspects of life too. As for the tree itself, it's thriving better than ever. This spring we noticed a family of owls nesting in its upper branches, adding yet another layer of protection. Apparently it's illegal to disturb active owl nests, not that anyone's trying to anymore. I've learned that sometimes the worst experiences can lead to the best outcomes if you handle them the right way. By staying calm, documenting everything, and letting the legal system work as it should, what could have been a tragedy became a triumph for both personal rights and community solidarity. The oak tree stands as tall as ever, its branches spread wide over both yards, dropping leaves wherever they may fall. And now, instead of causing conflict, it brings people together, providing shade for community gatherings and a reminder that standing firm in the face of intimidation while working within the law is always the right choice. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.